Just a few thank yous, since this is the first event in the series. Charles Falzon of RTA School of Media and Dean Garrett Hawk for funding support. Lila Pine and Joanne DeNova for hospitality. Rebecca Jeffrey, Kayla Altman and Dwight Alexander for help with promotion and publicity. Sean Haswell and Sean Aksani for technical setup. And thank you to the Mississauga for their land. Dr. Garrett Hawk, the Dean of FCAD, will say a few words, and then Dr. Lila Pine, Program Director in New Media in RTA, will introduce our artists. Thank you.
Wow, it's an ominous audience out there. It's so dark. Well, I'm delighted to be here tonight. It's a great privilege to be invited to welcome you on behalf of my colleagues at FCAD, my colleagues, staff, students, and faculty at FCAD, to the first of this series, hopefully long series of lectures. I didn't know we were now preoccupied. We're preoccupied with all kinds of things, mostly financial, but not so much theoretically preoccupied. And I'm glad to find out tonight that that is what we are, because when you're preoccupied and when you're occupied, it provides a tremendous amount of energy and room for reflection. And I understand that we are receiving some of that tonight on the part of our two guests. I have to look up the names, Jason, Edward Lewis and Skawennati. Looking at me, you might see a white, not Anglo-Saxon, but European male. And I'm probably not the kind of guy you'd associate with Aboriginal work, but I've actually dabbled in that, and I want to relate that, and because it's one of the reasons why I'm fascinated to be here tonight. I became involved in some of the convergences between theater and the digital media, about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And I had a not insignificant grant from CFI, the Canada Foundation for Innovation, to purchase video conferencing type of equipment that allowed the coming together of different performance groups from different parts of the world. And we created performances with performers in different states, different countries, different cities that performed at the same time in real time. My first project, my first preoccupation, excuse the pun, was to have a performance with Aboriginal performers from Western Australia, the Ninganunga people, close to Perth. From South Africa, the Kalahari Desert performers that I was working with through a friend of mine. From Izuma Productions up in Igloolik here in Canada. And of course from the Debarja Magic Theatre Company in Manitoulin Island and Wikwemikong. At the time, my intentions, my preoccupations were unfortunately not met by the available technology. The distances were too great, the technology had not been advanced enough, the streaming technology, to facilitate these performances. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you tonight what might be possible now. And so I'm very excited to welcome you on behalf of FCAD, and I very much look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. As a Mi'kmaq woman, it is with great pleasure, really great pleasure, that I welcome and introduce my Mohawk sister and brother, Kahnawake and Jason Lewis, to Ryerson on this Anishinaabe territory. I also want to thank Marussia for initiating this lecture series and for beginning it in a good way by inviting First Nations artists. Kahnawake and Jason Lewis are both new media artists and both directors of Aboriginal Territories in Cyberspace, which is a network of designers and academics creating new Aboriginally determined spaces online. The main objective of Aboriginal Territories in cyberspace is to identify and implement methods by which Aboriginal people can use new media technologies to complement our cultures. In other words, use digital technologies to empower Native people, especially our youth, to both preserve and produce and invent knowledges, cultures, and languages. Skawennati is concerned that Aboriginal people show up in the future. She fears that if we cannot see ourselves in the future, we will not be there. She hopes that if we can visualize our participation in this world, there's a good chance that we will become active agents in it, and that we will help shape the new medias. Jason Lewis's research creation revolves around experiments in visual language, text, and typography. He is particularly interested in how the deep structure of digital media can be used to create innovative forms of expression. Welcome, both of you. In my language, Walalan, for sharing. And I just was asked by Marussia to mention that there will be a Q&A after the talk. So.
Are you on? Am I on? I'm on.
Hello. Nyawagoa Lila, Nyawagoa to everyone. Segos, Skawennati Ujets. My name's Skawennati, and I just said hello. Take it away.
My name is Jason Edward Lewis, and say hello as well. And I just want to point out that I'm Cherokee, not Mohawk. I know the Mohawks want to claim everything, but they don't get to claim me. And we want to thank Marussia for inviting us to be part of this event, and we're very honored to be the inaugural speakers.
First people first.
And to the Ryerson community for coming out tonight to listen to what we have to say.
I think you're starting this talk. Do you want to press the buttons?
Okay. So we're going to talk tonight about Aboriginal territories in cyberspace. As Marussia said, this is a research network that we started about 7 years ago at this point, that basically artists, activists, academics, technologists, people who are interested in general with how Native people are using new media technology to tell our stories. When we started the project, we started the project when we sort of, I think, kind of met each other, but sort of some of the seeds for the project got started before that, which is going to be Skawennati's moment.
So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, we don't do this often. We're doing the tag team. We usually get full control ourselves. What we're going to talk about is a couple different projects. So we'll talk a little bit about the history of Aboriginal territories in cyberspace, and then our two big projects, which are the SKINS, Aboriginal workshops on Aboriginal storytelling and digital media, the Time Traveler Machinima series that Skawennati directs.
Time Traveler TM.
Time Traveler TM, yes. Sorry, got to remember the TM. And something that we just came up with last night, basically, that we're calling scouting. We didn't come up with what we're doing, but we can sort of figure out a way to sort
All
of
the other stuff.
all the other stuff.
We lumped under this other heading.
So we're going to cover all this evening, and very much looking forward to having questions afterwards. So next is Skawennati.
So as you referred to earlier, Cyber Powwow was a project that I started that took a while to run its course, let's say. But really what it was one of the first forays into cyberspace by Native people. It was basically an online gallery in a graphical chat space. I can talk about Cyber Powwow for like hours. So I think that basically I wanted to tell you that we used a new technology, graphical chat, to ask the question, can Native people make art in a digital setting? Is there a place for Native people in cyberspace? And we continue to ask, and of course the answer was yes, but we continue to ask more questions kind of as Cyber Powwow went along. And another important point that I want to mention about Cyber Powwow was that while it was online, there wasn't a word for this at the time, but we had mixed reality events. So basically there was the online Cyber Powwow where people, we would set aside actual dates, like for example, a Saturday and a Sunday in April, the first one in April 1997, and we set up 5 different locations across the country in artist-run centers. People came to those locations because not everyone had a modem back then, if you can, whoever can remember back then. And we logged on, we logged them in, we downloaded the software, and we all chatted with one another in that location and at the other 5 locations, and those few individuals who were brave enough and technologically advanced enough to log in at that time. So that, that part put the powwow into Cyber Powwow. There were a number of artists, one of them in this room, Archipachawis, who participated in the project. And you can see some documentation of it online at cyberpowwow.net if you like. But towards the end, I would say, I think it's important to say, we started, that's when I met Jason. And we continued asking the questions that CyberPower started. But one of the big questions we were asking was, if cyberspace can be seen as a territory, and certainly other people were seeing it as a territory, not just us, what part do we play in this territory? Where are Native people on this scene? Are we going to be affecting this territory? Are we going to be players? And we wanted that answer to be yes, of course, also. And so some of the projects that AbTech has undertaken are kind of in response to that.
Yeah, I would say actually all the projects are. That sort of fundamental question and those sort of first conversations that we had, where I was coming from Silicon Valley and sort of very deeply immersed in technology, and also very aware of the fact that that there were very few, in fact I don't know if I knew any at the time, Native people who were involved in the actual creation of the technologies that we were developing. Very few people who weren't white males, period. But almost no natives, and sort of starting to think about how that might change and what that change might mean. I think we, at that time and even today, we talk about how sort of an Indigenous point of view, or how an Indigenous point of view is different, and in what ways it might be different. And one of the ways I'm interested in thinking about that is in what way might be the Indigenous sort of production and use of digital technology be different than, say, mainstream use. So we spent a number of years sort of kind of bouncing these ideas and thoughts back and forth, and talking to some of our friends in the Aboriginal community and the technology community, and then to sort of in reference to a conversation that had dinner, which is kind of funny. We got some money, so that sort of changed things in the sense that we actually were able to kind of start getting some traction on these ideas. I apologize for that. I haven't used PowerPoint in like 4 years, and now I'm remembering why. What are you doing?
I'm pausing it.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because it's your PowerPoint presentation. You have the timer in it. Anyway, sorry. Behind the scenes. So, anyways, AbTech network meetings.
Blaming me.
What we the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council started up a granting program called Aboriginal Research Networks, and so we applied, basically saying, look, we want to investigate these questions that we've been talking to you about, and they gave us the money. So the first thing that we did is we convened a series of what we were calling network meetings. So sort of meetings to bring together the people that we thought would have interesting things to say about new media, Aboriginal people, media technology, and sort of finding an intersection between all of those things. Because we've been talking about it for a while, but it wasn't clear to us at all how we might go about addressing sort of the question of what we would do if we sort of were fully empowered as a community, and both in terms of what we would make and how we would represent ourselves. So the first network meeting was in 2006. And,
was Steve at that one?
Yes, Steve was at that one. Steve Loft down there, and a number of other people. And really, that was just a brainstorming 3 days. Really, just sort of like threw the questions out there and sort of talked through a lot of the issues and a lot of things that we were seeing. And then we were like, okay, well, we've just kind of got started on this. We need to have another one of these a year from now before we start working on anything. But we had come up with a couple basic ideas at that point. And one of the big ones is that, if we're interested in getting more Native people involved in making digital media, then maybe we should start sort of working with youth and seeing if we can encourage them to sort of take this path in terms of their creative practice. So we sort of kind of had the fuzzy idea that maybe we would do some workshops around digital media, but we didn't really know what that meant. And sort of over the course of the next year, sort of just in communication with each other, we sort of converged on the idea that maybe making video games would be a great way to motivate youth. I love that term, youth, the youth, to be engaged in producing, in learning the tools for digital media production. Sorry, this is a bit of a disaster. You got it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when we came up to the planning of the second workshop, we decided that what we would try to do is we would try to sort of structure a sort of a mini video game workshop where we would sort of all kind of learn what it might take to teach these students how to make video games, how to produce video games, and also to sort of start thinking about how we might approach that differently. Because this was back in 2006 when we were to 2006, 2007 when we were talking about this. And at that point, video game workshops weren't a dime a dozen. They were out there, so we had some templates to work from, but there weren't a lot of them. But we also knew that we didn't want it just to be a video game workshop. We wanted to think about what it would mean for us as a group of people interested and involved in the Aboriginal community to create games. So when we got together for the second network meeting, that's what we did. We basically did a mini game workshop.
We played games.
And sort of that was in the Wii. The Wii came out in 2006, right? So the Wii was still kind of fresh and new. We were like, oh my God, look what you can do. And thinking about how we might want to be able to do something with that, we started using Second Life, which is what the image is here on the left. Sort of thinking about, can we use it as a meeting space? Can we use it as an outpost in cyberspace? You know, what might be interesting about working in a shared online environment like Second Life, visual online environment like Second Life. And we came out of that workshop with the idea of like, okay, yes, this would be really cool to do these workshops, and also came out with the idea of the way to conduct these workshops is it sort of was in parallel with sort of a storytelling series, so telling stories from our communities, and also sort of an analysis of storytelling in our communities. So both sort of telling the stories, but also thinking about how those stories operate, why they're important to us as individuals, and why they're important to our communities, and why we might think about how sort of the next generation might be made more interested in listening to those stories and sort of making those stories their own. And so one of those ideas is, well, maybe if we could take some of those stories or aspects of those stories and remediate them into video game form, that might be sort of like a perfect combination of sort of working within the culture while teaching the students how to use this very modern technology.
You're doing that.
I'm doing this one.
Wow.
So yes.
Just
So I just want to put this up.
I got it. Just talk.
This is our first sketch of sort of thinking about what our Aboriginal territory in cyberspace might be. This is after playing with Second Life a little bit and sort of thinking about, okay, wow, we can sort of like buy land, or we can get land in Second Life, and we can create this outpost that would be Aboriginally determined, that would be a place where we could gather people together to sort of work on things and meet and talk and sort of figure out what it meant to live in cyberspace and produce in cyberspace.
I still want to make that red cube gallery.
Yeah, we never got to the red cube
But we
gallery.
made the sandbox, and we made the photo shoot studio.
And
the sandbox.
And then a couple years later, we ended up with this. So this is Skawennati is going to talk a little bit more about this. So we bought an island in Second Life. So Second Life is a shared online visual space that you can get an avatar and customize it, and you go into the space, and it sort of has full physics, and you interact with people. But the other thing you can do is you can build things in it. So you can buy land, like we bought land, and you can sort of build sort of anything that you can think of on that land. So we were thinking, okay, this is a really interesting place for us to sort of stake out some ground, sort of start creating the territory that we've been talking about. So a year after that, so the second workshop was in 2007, we started the Skins workshops. So Skins workshops on Aboriginal storytelling and digital media is what the full formal name is. The idea was sort of how can we tell old stories with new media? And the first round that we did with this, we did in conjunction with the Kahnawake Survival School, which is a high school in Kahnawake, which is Skawennati's home community. And we were working with Oizogo Lahash, who's one of the senior teachers there. And we basically came into her class once every 10 days for 2 hours, and then we got the students for 2 solid days once a month. And we did that for the entire year. And we taught them the basics of video game production, so 3D modeling, texturing, animation, programming, storyboarding, how to write a story, all the things that are related to actually producing a video game.
starting off with a major storytelling part, which was talking about telling the old stories to one another. So that we drew that link between the old stories and the new technology.
Yeah, so we sort of got started with this whole series where we used to spend a lot of time talking about stories and telling stories. And then about halfway through the year, sort of around January, something like that, we started the process of sort of trying to pull all those things together, sort of what they had started to learn on the technical side along with what we had discussed in the stories. And what was interesting for me, and I think I was more surprised than you were about this, but I was really concerned about this, the moment when we were like, okay, we've sort of like given you a taste of what some of the technology is about. You still have a lot to learn, but we've been talking a lot about the stories, and we've been telling stories. Now you need to come up with a story that's going to be something that will work in a video game. And I was anxious about that because I wasn't quite sure how that was going to work, and it was no problem for them. Okay, we went away there was an extended break for a month or something like that. And we were like, okay, when we come back, we need to have a story ready for us to go. And we came back, and not only did they have a story, but they had like a 8-foot-long piece of paper with the entire level for the game, sort of multiple levels for the game, sort of mapped out, sort of exactly what was gonna happen, and using different characters from the stories that we've been telling from the Kahnawake community, in a very traditional sort of adventure game format. But very much sort of inflected by the stories that we've been telling each other, and populated by creatures that they all recognize as coming from their community, and things that their aunties have been telling them about and their elders have been telling them about ever since they were small kids.
Yeah, it was clear to us that they totally got this game medium like better than we did.
Yeah, so one of the things that's interesting about all this is neither Skawennati and I are huge gamers, nor do we make games as part of our creative practice. We make all sorts of things for our creative practices, but we don't do games. And so part of the reason why we did the network meetings is that we had a huge, steep learning curve to go through ourselves just to learn what it meant to produce a video game. And luckily we had an amazing team, both in the research network and then also the research assistants that worked with us, that sort of taught us what we needed to know to make it seem like we knew what we were talking about when we were dealing with the students. So this is the first game that came out, Otzi, Rise of the Kahnawake Legends. So it was a first-person shooter, except it was a bow and arrow instead of a gun.
Otzi is like the monster, like, you know, the boogeyman. Like, you scare kids, like, if you don't eat your dinner, Otzi's gonna come.
Yeah.
So that's why we used that name, because there's so many, like, scary creatures in the game.
So they developed a whole story and a whole sort of kind of level of gameplay based around this creature. So this is just some of the images from that game. We did it in the Unreal Development Kit, and it's available to download on our website. We'll give you the URL at the end of it. It was, very successful, more successful than I sort of expected, just because we were trying it for the first time, wasn't sure how we were gonna sort of, how it was all gonna work together, and whether the students were gonna respond to it or not, whether they were gonna stick with us, whether we were gonna be able to sort of keep things going, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it all worked. We got an interesting game out of it. The students, from what they've said to us, had a very good time. Yes.
I might say that we didn't get an interesting game. We got an interesting vertical slice, which in the industry, game industry technology, we now know, is a nice idea of what the game was, but it wasn't really a game. I just want, that's for later.
And it's true, and in some ways, like, it's not the sort of game that you would sort of pull down off the shelf and be like, okay, I'm gonna spend 50 hours on this. But conceptually, like, it sort of proved out this idea of like, okay, there's some interesting room here to work with those stories and find ways to put them into this new medium. And part of that conversation as well is related to the question of what stories should be told, right? Because there's some stories that shouldn't be told outside of a particular subset of the community or a family or a particular longhouse or something like that. So there's a whole set of conversations about those sorts of things. And then for the stories that we could tell, then it was like, how do you actually sort of figure out how to kind of rearrange them so they make sense in a game narrative sense. So, but it seemed to work. So, wow, is this whole, am I still going?
That's how we said it. Well,
Okay.
It's be. I can talk about it if you want. You
Um,
want me to go?
Yeah, why don't you go for it? I'm getting,
I got
oh,
my
you
own.
got your own mic.
It's just, I know you, okay, it's good. So, next, moving on, we tried, we went for we wanted to do a second skins workshop. And a few things changed. We had to change from Unreal Development Kit to Unity. I don't remember why. I think Unreal Development Kit was like lame and Unity was awesome. So we had to change to it. We got a new group of kids. And actually, an interesting thing that we love to talk about and people seem to be very interested in is that one of the kids was 13 years old. We had decided that the kids should be 18 years and over because now they were going to come to Concordia. As you can see, we got some money from Concordia, and they wanted the workshop to be at Concordia. And we were really okay with that because traveling to the res every frickin' 7 days was actually not working for our family unit. So we worked, so we decided to do it at Concordia. And forgot what I was saying. See, this is why you're better at this one. Money.
I come in. So yeah, we decided to do Concordia because, and also we had really great facilities at Concordia. We had good facilities at the survival school as well. But it was nice to sort of be able to do everything in our home base.
Yeah, and so, but we decided 18 years and over.
Right, we decided
people coming into the city. So we got the, so we put that word out there, we started getting recruits, and then here's this mom saying, well, my daughter really wants to come, she's 13. So we were like, but there weren't that many recruits. So we're like, well, we're interested in opening her coming if there's a chaperone with her. And this woman says, well, I'm an artist, and I'm very interested in learning something new. How about I come with her? So we were like, yeah, come on. So this woman, Tawana Miller, and her daughter Lisa ended up being such strong participants and huge shapers in the game. So we told these students, this group now, that they could make their own game.
For the third one is we wanted to come bring the same students back and continue working with them and actually make a full game instead of just another vertical slice. And also we didn't want to have to kill everybody and ourselves by doing it at such an intense rate. So if we were working with students that we'd already given the foundation, really what we could focus on was production. So so we brought them back this summer.
We liked them a lot.
Yeah, last
also.
summer, and we liked them. And they seem to tolerate us. So for Skins 3.0, extended play, and so there they are.
Some of them.
Some of them. There was actually two more. There were two more and from the previous one, and then two of the students from the very first one came back as basically as junior mentors to work with us, which was very cool. So we made the third installment, and we're going to do another one this spring and summer. We actually don't know what we're going to do. We were just talking about it yet again on the flight over here.
I want to do Machinima.
She wants to do Machinima. We're a little bit wary about doing a game again, just because it's so time intensive, and we're not sure what we can do just in one cycle as opposed to the 2 cycles we took the last time. So anyways, anybody have any great ideas? Let us know. But we will do one more of some sort. I'm kind of converging on the idea of having them do a 4th level for the existing universe and working within that universe, but we'll see where that goes.
Scouting. So there's a number of other things that we've been doing kind of all this time that we're starting to realize is kind of a thing that we do. Residencies, well, I actually got a residency. Canada Council has a new media residency grant, and so for the Project Time Traveler TM that we'll be showing you in a moment, one of the ways we funded that was through a Canada Council residency. And now you saw Scott Betesina-Bandan in our Skins video we just showed you. We liked him so much, we asked him if he'd come back, and we wanted to see if he wanted to do his own project and do a residency at AbTech, use Hexagram's amazing facilities, and hang out with fun people. And he said yes, and we got the grant, so kind of like we're on a roll, and we'd love to try and maybe, I don't know, see if that can continue. Well, I don't know for sure, I just don't know how the Canada Council would feel about that. We've done some mentoring as well. A couple of years ago, there was this big deal where the NFB was partnering with smaller organizations to do digital projects. One of them was called First Person Digital, and despite how it sounds, it actually wasn't about first people. However, 2 young women, there was it was a competition, and 6 projects were chosen. 2 of those, I was on the jury, and I saw these 2 projects on the jury that were awesome, and they were both by Aboriginal women, and they were both looking for mentorship, and I was like, of course I'll help. These have to be made. And so, so that just sort of has become another thing that we do. And I don't know why you wrote infrastructure, because I had resource sharing.
Same thing.
Well, we just, so now there are some, been approached very specifically. I should probably keep going. Wait, what?
Yeah, can I say something real quick as you go through? Because we've got watch time, so I think we should move to. We have a half hour, so we got your videos to show. So I just one thing on the infrastructure resource sharing thing. There's one of the things that we both are very cognizant of is that we are in an incredibly privileged position. I have a lab at Concordia University. Skawennati is there working on the time traveler thing. It's in the middle of this amazing infrastructure called the Hexagram Center for Research Creation on New Media, Art, and Technology. And we also have incredibly talented students who are working with us. And so we're very interested in sort of extending that infrastructure and those resources out to the community and finding ways that we can help other Aboriginal new media creators do the sorts of things that they want to do. So these are just some examples of different projects that we've sort of helped along in one way or another.
Here's one of those winners I was talking about. These two were the two projects, the first-person digital projects. Yeah, I think that was sort of good enough.
Yep.
Just
go back.
So annoying. Okay. So yes. So Time Traveler TM is kind of my baby. It's definitely, as you saw, it's one of our AppTech projects. I'm going to show you a couple of episodes tonight, but I want to tell you just a couple of things about them first. I guess the first thing to say is that what you're watching is not animation, but Machinima. And Machinima is making movies in a virtual environment. Some of you may have heard of it, like there's a famous one called Red versus Blue, where they take game movement, take screen captures really from the game Halo, and they've got like this soldier dressed in red and this soldier dressed in blue, and they're saying all these things that you don't expect soldiers to say to one another, and it's very hilarious. I chose Second Life to tell a story I'd already written, actually. I'd actually visualized this story as a 3D, as a first-person shooter, I should say. But it was like not possible. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the know-how to make this kind of a 3D animation of this story. And then years passed, and someone showed me Second Life, and I was like, oh my God, that is what I've been waiting for all this time, to tell this story. So the story, you're going to see what it's about. So I want to, by watching it, I just wanted to give you that information, and also the idea that the reason why it's an AppTech project is because we wanted to see if we could tell a story in another digital medium, not just video games, although some people say that Second Life is a game, but to just tell it in another way. And also I felt that Second Life was very representative of the future, our future, sort of these avatars coming together to talk, have relationships, do business. And I actually still believe that we're going in that direction at some point in the not too far future. And as we said earlier, I really wanted to see Aboriginal people in the future. There's sort of an irony here because actually what happens is he goes to the past a lot, but
he's from the future.
But he is from the future. Episode 1 took 2 years. We were learning everything. We didn't know the correct settings. First of all, we didn't even know what software to use to capture the action in Second Life. We didn't know. Once we figured out what software to use, we didn't know what settings we should use. We had to do that. I mean, every single thing we learned. We learned how to build. We learned how to move. Everything. So episode 2 took a year. Episode 3, I think, took 6 months. We're getting faster, but new things keep popping up all the time. So we're on episode 7 now, and now one of the production assistants has to learn how to rig clothing. So, because clothing in Second Life, as you can see here, it's like it was painted on before. And now it's a lot better. It looks like clothing is actually on you, not just stuck to the body. However, if you want it to move with your avatar's body, it has to be rigged. It has to also know where there's a skeleton beneath it to move. So we have to learn, we think we're making gains, but then we have to slow down sometimes. So is this, okay, yeah. Well, I said stop at some of the ones that I want to stop on. Was that one not one of them? The one above it? Before it? I go up and down. Maybe that's the problem. Okay, so yeah. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of the slides and some of the decisions that we made, or that I guess I made, in creating this world that I'm setting it in 2112. And Hunter is this Mohawk man. He lives in a storage locker. You saw his little apartment. And that was directly from my favorite novel, Snow Crash. If anyone here has read it, I don't know. Yeah. So, I really could see him living in that kind of, well, first of all, that's the world I wanted it to be, like this futuristic, hyper-consumerist world where, like, even talented people, couldn't make it enough to, like, live in anything better than a storage locker. And then there were also some choices I had to make in order to make him look native. And it was funny for me to think about that. Like, what are some signifiers that I could put on my avatar to make the audience know that he's a native guy? And so my original idea was that I was going to give him a traditional Mohawk. Like in Kahnawake, a lot of people now, males, have this Mohawk. It's not like a punk Mohawk. It's kind of flat, but it's like the sides are really shaved. And, well, I searched everywhere in Second Life to try to buy one from someone who already made it, and then we tried to make our own, but we just couldn't do hair in our team. But in my searches, I came across this Dreadhawk. And I kind of liked that idea of it being, it looked pretty Mohawky, but it also was something of a mixed culture kind of thing. And then I gave him the camouflage pants, which I don't know if it says that to other people, but I feel like around where I come from, it's sort of like because of 1990, like the camouflage clothing is something that's very, to me, a native signifier. And of course, I gave him the Confederacy flag T-shirt. So I just wanted to tell you about that. This is from episode 2. We can keep just going. I can talk about each one. I can talk about a tiny detail of each one for like a long time. So you saw this one. And now in this one, in episode 4, I will start talking, but this is the one you're supposed to stop on. What happens is, Garakuhawi, it starts off with Garakuhawi. The little girl that you saw in episode 3, she grows up. And she's an art history student, and she's a traditionalist Mohawk, which means that she follows a traditional, the Longhouse religion. So she's never really been in the church, but she's like going to university, and she's supposed to write this paper about like some famous public figure, so she chooses Kateri Tekakwitha, who, in case you don't know, is now Saint Tekakwitha, and her bones are interred in the church in Kahnawake, St. Francis Xavier Mission. I'm showing you this picture because Garakuhawi is in the church, in this kind of really old church, with her new technology, and filming Tekakwitha. So I just wanted to let you know that was also a choice, that I want to show my characters as very technologically adept and not afraid of using technology, and still very secure in their Indianness, hangover from Cyber Powwow. And then she goes to a powwow in the future, and it takes place at the Winnipeg Olympic Stadium. And there are some drummers. And then this one I wanted to talk with you a little bit about, because in it there's like this big jumbotron screen that's rotating, and people are watching the action that's on the stages and here. And there's this kind of commercial that comes on for like these native designers, for a fashion show that's going to be on later. And I wanted to tell you why I put these girls in there. They're like wearing, I felt like it was very Mohawk centric, my little shows. And at this powwow, I wanted it to be it was central, it was taking place in Winnipeg. There was this Mohawk character, and I wanted to bring in some West Coast a little bit. So like we made these West Coast gowns, totally ripping off Lawrence Paul, with the nice ovoids. And, and I also wanted them to be futuristic and cool, kind of. I mean, I don't know how futuristic they really are, but I love that hair. Isn't that awesome? And then finally in episode 5, she actually goes to see Kateri Tekakwitha. I'm so excited about this episode. I really want to show it to you. But you can watch it online as of Friday. I'll be uploading it very soon, tomorrow. And it took a long time to make this one also, because we really did our research. We actually went to this awesome interpretive site, an archaeological site near Montreal, near Kahnawake, which is a Iroquois village from the 1400s. It's okay, keep going. It's true, we don't have that much time. Like I said, I could keep talking. Here's episode 6.
Alcatraz.
The Indian occupation. So I stopped on this one because it was a big decision. Okay, no, never mind. It's true. We'll stop. It's good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So,
Yeah. If we can put the lights up. Actually, they're over here somewhere.
Thank you so much, Skawennati and Jason, and we've got a bit of time for Q&A. We're gonna actually we should tell you we're making a podcast of this event and our future lectures. And so in order for the questions to be recorded, you have to speak into a mic. So could I have a volunteer, just someone to pass the mic to people who are asking questions? Thank you.
and is this thing on? Yes. Sorry, I can't tell. So.
Okay, so yes, please ask us questions about any of that. There's a lot of stuff. I know.
Okay. What? Yeah. Just wait for your. Where do you go for the to? We should have made a slide of that. Hang on.
Yeah, actually, if you go to abtech.org right here and click on the skins project, it'll take you to a page that'll have the download link on it. So, yeah.
I want to say thank you very much. It was amazing to see the work that you're doing, and to bring community and First Nations, Native culture, just the vision as an African descendant and someone who works in community and we've had this type of dialogue, and it's amazing to see this work. And a lot of the Machinima work that I've seen, I've never really taken it as seriously as what I've seen today, so I do want to comment on that. And what I want to ask you about, two things. One is Ubisoft. If you could tell us a little bit about how that happened, because this is a first-rate video game development company, and I'm curious about the music and sound. I don't think that was touched upon. Thanks.
I'll take Ubi, you take sound. So Ubisoft, there's a student who was a graduate student in my program named Morgan Kennedy, who went to work at Ubisoft after he got finished, and he was involved in the very early stages of the Skins workshops. Was always a very enthusiastic supporter of it. And so when he went to Ubisoft, he evangelized the project because he knew that part of what we wanted to do when we did the workshops was get industry people in. And we'd sort of been talking through our networks, and we were trying on our own, but he really kind of sort of went around Ubisoft, found people. I think what he did is, the key thing he did is he found people who were sort of both very good at what they do, but also really good people. And kind of by the time he got done talking with it, there were more people than we could accommodate who wanted to come and sort of take the opportunity to talk to the students. And so we had them come in, and it wasn't just Ubisoft, but it was Compulsion, and so it was like AAA down to sort of independent small places. And they came in for the first workshop and gave presentations, but they also we brought in some other ones to give a group crits, and then they came back for the second stage this last summer to give crits at that time, and they're both they were critical. They gave us some really good feedback and very honest with the students, I think. But a number of them spoke to us about the fact that part of what they really liked about the project is because of the sort of the meaningfulness of it, sort of like taking a form that they know very well and sort of doing something with it they felt that had sort of like really sort of deep and profound cultural implications. And of course, what happened, by the time we got to this summer, what we were becoming fully aware of was the fact is that Assassin's Creed 3 had a half Mohawk character in it. And that they were actually working with cultural advisors from the Kahnawake community and using people from Kahnawake as a voice talent to do the Mohawk in the game, because the Mohawk speak Mohawk in the game, which just came out yesterday. We just got it in the lab. And so it's incredibly cool that they really sort of went to a lot of lengths to try to represent the culture sort of accurately and sort of integrate in an interesting way. And then also some of the people who were involved with that were coming to the workshops, and part of that is at least because of what was going on with the big game. Sound?
Yeah.
We'll just answer the sound question real
Do
quick. Yeah. Or audio question.
I've been working, since I started working on Time Traveler, I kind of slowly learned how important sound was. And I have a wonderful sound designer that I work with, but I also I worked quite hard to try to find Aboriginal musicians and composers and artists. And so, so that also carried over into the Skins project, where we've had this amazing Darwin Frost. If you saw him, that he was our sound guy. We knew we had to get an Aboriginal sound guy. And we did, and he's fantastic, not only in the music he produces, but also, in bringing his heart and his good mind to the project to share. He really wants to share his knowledge with others.
I want to echo how great this was, and thank you for sharing it all. I have a question. What has the response been from the community at large, particularly older generations that are involved with it, in terms of taking stories and characters that have, from a traditional platform into something so new and innovative, and I'm curious as to whether or not it has been embraced at all, or whether there's any concern about it out of the traditional culture.
I think when we first started this project, before there was anything we could show people, when it was just still the idea in our head, it was like, oh no. We went to a couple of places in the community where we wanted to partner with them. In certain instances, the person had never seen a video game. They were not interested. But thankfully, we found Owizogo, and Owizogo is a very open-minded person. She herself's an artist, and but I think mostly, really the great majority has been very receptive to the idea. Owizogo is a very powerful person, and so when she decides that something is important enough to undertake, a lot of people get on board. And so that was very helpful. It was sort of wonderful that the first few people said no, so that we could have her as a partner, and Kahnawake and Survival School, and then later the Kahnawake Education Center as our partner. Go ahead.
I think as far as, and also, it's difficult to gauge with any certainty what the community response is. What we do know is that, after working with the Kahnawake Survival School, the Kahnawake Education Center, which is sort of the overarching sort of education authority on the reserve, agreed to work with us and was very excited about the opportunity that they saw for the youth, both in terms of education and in terms of culture. And that the students keep coming back. We hear positive things. We had a launch of the game this last Thursday in Kahnawake that was extremely well attended. About 60, 70 people showed up for that, and seemed very happy afterwards. So we haven't yet. Nobody's come after us. So
Yet, it's still new. We just launched it last week.
I'm going to actually call on myself. I jumped up to get the microphone, but you made the joke earlier when you were talking about that contest of first person. What was it? First
person digital.
First person digital, and it made me think when you said first person shooter that there could be a similar joke made there. So the question I have,
thought of that.
right? So the question I have is that in this effort to take traditional stories and translate them into the medium, especially the video game, not so much the Machinima. How do you find that there are narrative frameworks around video games that are pretty solid and pretty hard to move around? And the first-person shooter is one of them. Now, it's obvious you could translate that to sort of warrior culture, in certain kinds of ways, but how, did you find some of those narrative frameworks constraining?
Absolutely. But we had to decide early on, and you can jump in when you want. We've talked a lot about this, and we had to decide early on what was our goal. Do we want to see the video game deconstructed and reconstructed in indigenous fashion, or do we want these kids to learn how to make a video game and use a medium that they loved? And that's where we went. That's what we wanted.
Yeah, there was particularly in the workshops, there was a lot of discussion about that because the number of the people who were
When
coming.
you say the
Sorry,
meetings,
not the workshops, the network meetings at the beginning, because a number of the people that came in and donated their time to sort of brainstorm with us about this have sort of research agendas within the game sphere which are about deconstructing sort of the status quo, about sort of being critical about these frames that have been set up and being just sort of replicated, the misogyny, the sexism, the violence, all those sorts of things. And so, we had people who were like, I don't want to participate in making a first-person shooter game, right? That's not what I do, I criticize that sort of thing, but we just kept saying, look, the point isn't about the game per se. The point is to teach these kids how to make digital media, and we're just using game as the lure to get them in, and so we can't very well say, look, we want you to come and spend 120, 140 hours over the next year or over the next couple of months learning this very difficult stuff. Oh, and by the way, the sorts of games you want to build, we're not going to let you build them. Okay, you got to build this kind of game over here. So we're just like, that's not going to work, right? So.
Hi, I'm Tess. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. It was really interesting. And I think it's really interesting the focus, I guess, that you put on storytelling when you were doing the video game workshops and program. I think that's very interesting, and it's often lacking from modern video game, is like a real sense of a narrative and a real basis in storytelling. But there's so much capacity in that format to tell an actual story. And what I was wondering was, who do you feel you're targeting with your work? Like, is it meant to speak to everyone and educate everyone about Aboriginal people, or is it meant to just focus on Aboriginal people and drawing them into media?
Someone was talking, I just read a really great article about African American literature. And they talked about how there was a moment where African American writers stopped writing for white people and started writing for African Americans, and also as though white people were looking over their shoulder. Now, I didn't do that quote justice, but what I meant is, this is what I think we're doing. What I think we're doing is, we're writing for everyone, but not in the same way for everyone. So when I make my Machinima, for example, those stories, and I feel the similar thing is happening in the game that we made, we're telling these stories to kind of our people, and it could be like Mohawks, you could say, and then Aboriginal people, and then everybody else, to like who's as sort of in their degrees of interestedness and connection to that community. I think so. Yeah, I think the answer is everybody, but not in the same way for everybody. Is that okay for you?
Yeah. We're in a circle, yeah.
I was really moved by the retelling of the Oka story, and I remember still the way that story was told in standard media, and I love that you drew from those sources. It made me think about trauma and about what it's like to tell a trauma story, and about this sort of central idea in trauma theory that to work through trauma, you have to move into the future.
Mm.
And but I wanted to ask you, sort of from your perspective, your strategy in telling the story from the future.
Thank you. That's a lovely question. Well, really, it is about presenting a new perspective
I think science fiction gives us an opportunity. I mean, it's been done so many times before to pretend that we're coming at it from this objective viewpoint. I don't really think I'm not even pretending to be objective. What I like to think I'm doing is bringing that Aboriginal or even Mohawk, like even to say that specific viewpoint to the story. I like that you mentioned, I don't know about trauma theory, but when I spoke with Ellen Gabriel when I was making this, when I was still writing it, because that episode in particular was very tricky. I won't say difficult to write, because the story was there, right? But I really wanted to be very careful not to offend certain people. And because it was so it was so painfully fresh. I mean, 20 years passed in the blink of an eye. I can't tell you how many tears I shed researching this episode. And it was wonderful, so wonderful to talk with Ellen, because Bradley's name keeps coming in, and Bradley, and my mother, and my cousins, and a lot of different people. But what Ellen said was how much, she hadn't seen any of the previous episodes, but she said, our people have always used time travel to heal ourselves. And I was just like, whoa, it just felt really nice, yeah.
Hi, Jason and Skawennati. First of all, I just want to congratulate you on all the work that we saw this evening, and it's great to see the way it has developed and continues to develop. And I guess I just wanted to ask if you could reflect for a moment on what I think of as this, I think that both of you have provided us with this great example of this kind of expanded field of practice. It's no longer just about an individual producing and making things to share with others. There are individuals in play all the time, but I think that there is, just as you said, there are, this sort of varying degrees of audience. There's this varying degree of engagement, and it feels like all the projects, to a certain extent, are interconnected, and they're constantly expanding and contracting, and I guess what I'm interested in is how you sort of manage that expansion and contraction to a certain extent, or how you begin to think about your own role in this expanded field of practice.
Well, I think a key thing in terms of keeping all this going is the fact that we actually can catch 15, 20 minutes before we fall asleep at night and talk to each other, and sort of make sure that things are moving along and deal with problems and stuff like that. Like having a partner or having a partnership where we spend a lot of time with each other, I think is really key, because there's just a constant sort of set of things that have to be dealt with. But I think for me, one of the pleasures of it is that actually that these are large projects with a lot of people involved, and that they manage to work. And I think that part of it is that we take a lot of pleasure. So we have our personal practices, right? And then we have sort of this AbTech thing. And so in our personal practices, where we get to be we do everything, we get to be the tyrant, and it's always exactly the way that we want it to be, right? As individuals, right? We don't mess with each other's private practice, right? Or individual practice. But sort of this bigger thing here, with the Aboriginal territories in cyberspace, part of the joy is sort of finding people who are interested in the sort of things that we want to do, have something interesting to contribute, whether it's discussion or actual sort of practice, or whatever it might be, and finding ways to sort of get them in and get them integrated, and keeping everybody kind of aligned to what it is that we're trying to do. And this goes back to the earlier question about the first-person shooter thing, for instance, right? Is trying to be clear amongst the two of us, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? Are we trying to critique the media? Are we trying to do something about representation? Are we trying to build to sort of educate for basic skills? What is it? And sometimes it shifts, and sometimes we're not clear. We get out of sync with each other. But I think at this point, now that we're sort of 6 years into it, the magic is that this started out as just a sort of a series of conversations, and now it's this thing, right, that involves on a regular basis about 15 to 20 people, and it's produced these various bits of media that live out there in the world. And so now it's kind of, it's us, but it's also kind of outside of us in a way as well. I don't know if that's answering your question, really,
Yeah.
but.
I think, we have, Jason's so modest, right? But I mean, he does do this incredible management trick, which I don't quite understand, of, finding amazing people. As far as the research assistants who really do make us look good, Jason's the one who finds them, mostly through his program at Concordia. And so, yeah, that's part of it too. You got to kind of clone yourself as much as possible, like multiply yourself, I should say, and get people to help you. And then the expansion and contraction part is like, we were expanding, and now we're starting to contract because, well, some of the money's going out, and mostly that's, I think it's time for us to, we've been giving out, like as artists, I think you have a time where you're like taking in, then you have a time where you're putting out, and then you have to take in again. And I think we've been putting out for a while, and we need to, I know that sounded funny. I know that's what I need. I need to sort of take in a little bit. Like I need to get some energy and some stuff back in me,
Yeah, the skins, like we're gonna do one more workshop. Skawennati is gonna be done with Time Traveler in June, right?
You say that in such, I don't like how you said that to me.
No? Oh, I'm sorry. And I have another creative project that I'm doing that's going to be done in June as well. And then we've been talking about like we're going to take some time to like figure out sort of to come down a bit and figure out what the next cycle of things is going to be, whether we're going to continue with the workshops or AbTech or whatever it might be, because it's been running full bore for about 4 years now. And it's a lot of fun, and it's not. It's not even
It's
particularly
totally
tiring.
fun.
It's just time to. it's just time, I think, to refresh maybe and sort of think about what the new tactics are. And
We would
I
like
also
to find
think
someone who could do a big part of it.
yeah, if you know anybody who might be able to run the skins workshops,
Yeah.
we will find the money to pay them to do that. But I think that I also I don't know if you feel this way, but I also feel like sort of thinking about in research terms. We've done a pretty good job of proving out our hypothesis, and so now it feels like, okay, what's the new hypothesis? Like, what's the next step on that trajectory, sort of, and pushing that argument, further about sort of, Native people and technology, Native people in the future, etc.
Well, thanks very much, Skawennati and Jason, for a wonderful and thoughtful conversation. And thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
And please stay tuned for our future lectures. Sarah Schulman and Dorothy Kidd are going to be visiting in the spring. And like us on Facebook, pre/Occupy Theory. Let's continue the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you.